Hello again, everyone. This is Bob Martin, the RC Subguy with the NautilusDryDocks.com. Wanted to revisit another little blast from the past. Past build that found its way back home for a little bit of troubleshooting, packing up and shipping back to its owner. But I thought I'd also take the opportunity to talk about linkages, a few little hints and tricks that I have when you are designing your linkages. You may want to keep them in mind. So let's take a look. So the boat that I have behind me is a 1/50th scale Upholder class submarine from OTW out of the UK. And for those of you who are brushed up on your submarine knowledge, you'll also know that the Canadian Navy owns a few of these boats that they bought off of the British Navy. Not so sure if they are super enthused about that deal because they didn't turn out to work so hot when they got them. But regardless, this is also the Canadian Victoria class submarine. So British Upholder or Canadian Victoria class submarine. This was built quite a few years ago for a gentleman, got it put together, shipped back out there. He shipped it back because there was an issue. The boat would not turn on. So I did some troubleshooting. It turned out to be a faulty receiver. Not a big deal, just had to do a little bit of troubleshooting and crack into the cylinder. But since it's here, hey, let's take a look at it and show you how it works. So these are the guts of this particular Upholder build. Let's start at the front here. Some linkages for the bow planes. And again, like I said, I'm going to talk about linkages here in a few minutes. A big 12-volt, 5-amp-hour sealed lead-acid battery. And if you've followed my videos before, you'll know that sealed lead-acid batteries actually don't mind being in the water at all. What you'll find is that on the positive terminal, you'll end up with some green, kind of like oxidization or corrosion that ends on going on there. So you want to put a dollop of silicone on there. This piece, this adapter piece, wasn't here when he sent it back. I fabricated a new one real quick so I could do the troubleshooting. He can do whatever he wants. I am not going to do it for him. We got magnetic linkage connectors right here. Then we get to the cylinder, and the way that it's held down, see those knurled brass nuts there, and then this bracket simply slips onto the top like that, and you tighten down that little bolt on the top, and that holds the cylinder down. On the inside, we got a remote on-off switch. Our main geared pump, two-way pump, goes through a solenoid valve, and that pumps water in and out of this sealed ballast tank. Moving into the back, we got our brand new receiver, our rudder and rear dive plane servos, our automatic pitch controller, and a big, huge, monstrous, beefy main drive motor. And this gets us into the linkages in the back of the boat. We've got a dog bone adapter here that runs into this adapter for the shaft. Goes into a universal joint and into this big, monstrous, like 3 3/4, 4-inch diameter brass propeller. So that is, kind of it. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn everything on here. So you always turn the receiver or the transmitter on first. And then we're going to use our fancy key fob here, and we're going to hit on. And I'll point over here. There we go. Pump kicks in for a second. Got a few little lights that come on inside. So let's go through some of the functions here. We've got forward dive planes. We've got our rudder action going on in the back there. We've got our dive planes. And those are on, as I said, an automatic pitch controller. So as the boat dives, those rear dive planes move to counter that pitch, keep everything on a nice even keel. We've got our main throttle, nice and smooth in both directions. And our pump. And I'm just going to run it for just like 1 second because these pumps don't like being run dry. There you go. These OTW systems use probes inside the ballast tank to let the system know when it is full and when it is empty. So there you go. That is all of the main functions of the boat, and it's all functional and operational. Let's talk about linkages. All right, I told you we're going to talk about linkages, so let's start out with the various ways of connecting linkages together. So coming out of your watertight cylinder, you got like a shaft connected to your servo, typically ends in just like a piece of brass, or if you're lucky, you know, like a little threaded rod, you know, like that. And there's a few different ways of mechanically connecting that output shaft to the linkages that you build. One of them that I like the best, these are some that were originally engineered by David Merriman III. He called them click-ons. I manufacture a variant of these also called click-ons in 2 different sizes, but these are magnetic. So you can hear that. And they're pretty powerful. But I do make them in 2 different sizes. There is the smaller size that I'm holding there right now, and then there's this larger, beefier size with a big 1/4-inch magnet. And they're mix and match. You could have, for example, a big magnet on your cylinder and a little one on your boat, or 2 little ones or 2 big ones, all kinds of things like that. Advantage to that is it makes it really easy to take your cylinder in and out of your boat. So for example, looking at the rear of the upholder here, you can see these large magnetic click-on connectors. To take them apart, you just go blip like that and blip like that, and that's it. You're done. You don't have to mess around with screwdrivers and pliers, and to make them up, that's it. Done. Completely made up and ready for the pond. So having said all that, there are obviously also mechanical connectors, and some that I kind of like are these ball and socket style. They've got like a nylon ball right here. Let's see if we can make that thing focus. Anyhow, and a ball, and it just snaps right in. Oh, that's going to be hard to do with my fingers, but anyhow, it goes like that, and you can see that ball swivels around inside that pocket. You know, advantage to that is, you know, they're good in multiple angles. It doesn't need to be a straight on connection, and they're fairly easy to get on and off. You can take some pliers and pinch them together, and they will snap together. That particular one that I showed you was you know, a really kind of heavy duty one, but you've got smaller variants as well. Pulling this out of my little parts bin here, so you see these are probably more common, these little nylon ones that go into these little black balls. There you go, managed to do that one. And that just, like I said, just kind of swivels around. So that's another form of mechanical connection that you can utilize to connect your linkages. And one that you guys are probably most familiar with are these good old clevises. And these are really easy to use. Basically, for example, if you had a connection like this, you just spread these clevis wings, and goes through the hole, and now you've got a connection just like that. That's a little trickier to get on and off. You got to get like like screwdriver inside there and pry it up, pull it apart. But it's obviously exceptionally solid, and there's not much wiggle room in there. So those are kind of, I would say, like the 3 more common connections. Another style that's actually pretty good are these guys here. These go on the top of like a rod or a servo horn, for example, and you can run your rod through the inside, and then the bolt goes through the top, and that secures that in place. So lots of options for an actual mechanical connection for your linkages. All right, the next part is really physics, and we're talking about arms and throws and that kind of thing, and for that I'm going to utilize my handy dandy wet erase board here, and we're going to do some doodles. All right, a few different things that we need to think about when we are making our linkage connections, and that is how much throw do we need, how much torque do we need, what sort of movement do we have in the servo, and where have we made our connections. So in very simplest form, looking at a connection from the top, we've got 2 swivel points, and those would for example, if we were looking at it from the side, be a servo horn that looks like that. As this moves back and forth, the shaft also moves back and forth, and this would be connected to like a rudder, for example, or something like that. Looking at it from the top, we're going to have a horn and a horn. They're very pointy horns. When we talk about physics, there is something called an arm, and that is basically the distance from a pivot point that's going to create mechanical advantage that's going to allow us to swivel something. So let's pretend that this side is our servo and this side is our rudder. All right. Typically these horns are going to have a series of holes, and that's for adjustability, and that's exactly what we are talking about here right now. Let's pretend that our rod is connected right here. We're going to run it straight across to the same hole over here. The big thing to note is that this distance and this distance is exactly the same, which means there is a 1-to-1 ratio of movement here to movement here. So if this servo swivels 20 degrees this way, this horn is going to move 20 degrees over there. All right? Now, a lot of times you're not going to have the luxury of having your servo arm being the exact length of your rear connection. So for example, your rudder may be in a very tight confined place where the hull is like this. So what's going to end up happening is you're not going to be able to connect, obviously, to the outside. Your horn is going to look something like that. That linkage is going to connect here, and if this is half of this distance, then you're going to get twice the movement out of the rudder as you do from your servo. So if your servo swivels 20 degrees, your rudder will swing 40. Now that's rough, and it doesn't actually work that way because this is circular, and as it moves, that distance actually becomes smaller. But for the sake of this, as an introductory to linkages, just keep in mind that this distance and this distance are really important. If this is big and this is small, your control surface is going to move more. Now, if for whatever reason your control surface goes out here, and this is 2 times this distance, then if this moves 20 degrees, this will only move 10 degrees. So you can see that you've actually got a lot of flexibility in terms of setting up your linkages to get the proper throws. Now, adjusting those distances is a way to do it mechanically. You can also do it electronically via your transmitter if you've got a computerized radio. So for example, the VEX units that I sell, you can set your scale, which basically means it will reduce all movements of the servo by a set percentage. Or you can set endpoints, and that can be on the left side and the right side, so the servo won't go beyond a certain point. And that's important if your linkage is binding or hitting anything. You can actually set it in your radio so that it stops before that happens. So what if you don't have a computerized radio and you want to make sure that you don't damage your linkages because they are overactuated? All right, and I've done this in my Nautilus model before because that had a swiveling propeller, and I did not want it to strike the hull of the boat. It's swiveled about this point here, and this is simplified obviously. Got like a servo horn, and then as that moves forward and back, the propeller tilts forward and back. If we've got our servo back over here, you've got the linkage that runs to the back, and that's all fine. But I wanted to make sure that there was absolutely no way whatsoever that prop could strike the hull. And so all I did is I created a bulkhead in here, and I put a wheel collar here and here attached to that linkage rod. And so as this moves forward and back, these hit the bulkhead this way, and this one hits it when it moves this way, and that's limiting the field of travel for the linkage. So you can do that in your boat to make sure that you don't, for example, swivel a linkage yoke to hit your propeller shaft. So if we were looking at that from the top, and the yoke is a U-shaped deal that would go this way, and it would swivel back and forth. But if it swivels too much, that will swivel out and it'll strike that propeller shaft. The yoke looks like this from the side, by the way. You have your rudder, and your top rudder, and here's your drive shaft in the middle. So this moves in and out, and you've got your shaft in the middle, free and clear to rotate without striking. But again, you don't want it to, the yoke to be able to move too much to hit that. You could set up a physical, mechanical block so that it doesn't go any further. Of course, just watch, because servos are pretty powerful, and they can bend and break things. So if you have too much excess throw in there, you could break something. But this is a good way to set up sort of a fail-safe for your boat. Well, there you go. Talked a little bit about linkages and setting them up. What I like to do is to set my linkage horn on my servo at the closest one in, and about midway on the control surface. And that way, when you start playing with it, what you'll see is your control surface is just going to move a little bit, right? Because you've got that that servo horn connected very close to the shaft, so you don't have much of a throw on it. After you've got that in there, you've checked it, things are moving, then you can start moving it out a hole. Check the throw. Move it out a hole, check the throw. And then in that way, you are not overthrowing anything, potentially breaking or binding control surface or your model. So just a little bit of a hint or a trick. Start on the closest hole and move your way out as you go. Well, there you go, everyone. Showed you a very cool model that's going to be on its way back to the owner here very shortly, and we talked about linkages. Hopefully that helps you when you start engineering your own linkages for your RC Submarine model, or as would be very likely, perhaps rethinking or re-engineering a set of linkages that are maybe binding or don't have the proper throws on it. If I can help you, if you have any questions, hit me up anytime, bob@rc-sub.com. Be happy to walk you through it. Even better, make sure you get signed up for the Dive Tribe on my website. That'll give you a chance to actually show not only me, but other RC Submarine experts what you got going on, and we'll come up with some unique and awesome solutions for you to make your RC Submarine project come into fruition. My name is Bob Martin, the RC Sub Guy. Thanks once again for joining me. We will catch you next time.